Hi everyone, shalom, makore, sababa. Okay, back to English. I always hated doing audience participation, but I'm going to force you guys to do it. So by show of hands, raise your hand if you are originally from Israel. Okay, keep those hands up. Keep those hands up. Raise your hands if you are from abroad originally. Okay, now everyone raise your hands up. Now hold them up. Keep them for 20 seconds. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's been proven that if you hold your hands up for 20 seconds, like I just won a marathon, you're going to get a great shot of endorphins. It's going to make you feel really good. It's also been proven that if you keep doing it, that means you're listening to what I'm saying, which is really weird, so you can drop them down. All right, so why am I even here? My time hasn't even stopped yet. That's awesome. I have extra time. So I'm here to talk to you guys about travel. Why travel is in a city summit? Simply put, it's the world's largest industry. It's almost 10% of global GDP. It employs 1 in 11 around the world. And in 2012, over 1 billion trips were made. In 2030, we're going on to 1.8 billion trips, which means something simply is that the travel industry is not a fringe industry, nor is it cooling down anytime soon. Some of you may have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals that are going to be debuted by the UN later this month. Now, none of those goals actually mention travel or tourism explicitly, but rest assured, travel will have a deep role in the success of all 17 goals. Case in point, next to energy, travel is the #1 most preferred strategy in countries in the developing world for rising out of poverty. Urbanization, well, given the day and what we're talking about and who I have as a crowd, I don't need to get into the definitions of it. Suffice to say that it's one of the most radical and important changes in humanity. And those numbers, and that's just an exclamation mark. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about our futures, the futures of cities, and what we can do to shape that future. So I don't like to talk in binaries, but bear with me on this one. Let's place 2 visions for the future of our cities. Version 1, it's a cute kid, right? Don't let this little chimney sweep confuse you. A Dickensian future where cities are so environmentally degraded, in which years of our lives are shaved away, where social and economic inequality leads to endemic violence and unrest, where entire cultures are chopped up, commoditized, and sold to us, the consumer. It's dystopian, surely, but it's also not unthinkable. Version 2, or if we're still talking in binary 1, well, this is actually a rendering of a project that is about to take shape in New York City. It's called the Low Line. It's in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And what they're doing is they're literally building a public park in about over 1 kilometer of unused underground space, what was once holding trolleys in the good old 20th century for the crossing between Williamsburg Bridge. So this is pretty incredible for a few reasons. #1, you see those trees and that grass over there? Well, they invented the technology to be able to produce real photosynthesis. So those are going to be really real trees underground. But equally as important, the Lower East Side of Manhattan is one of the least green sites in the city, which means now there's going to be a park for the kids, the residents. It's also going to be a massive tourism attraction, bringing millions of dollars and great brand awareness for the Lower East Side. How do I know this? How many people, by show of hands, have heard of the High Line in New York? Of course, it's a beautiful site. It's one of the most iconic sites now in New York. And they had just opened it through a public-private partnership in the last 10 years. Game changer. So the future of the world is really in cities. We all know this. I'm here to say to you that the future of travel is also in cities. The cities that will excel in the future are those that strategize their plans for civic development with their plans for tourism development as extensions of one another. Why? The quality of life of your residents will be raised by the rise in income coming from tourism. The tourists are attracted to higher and better infrastructure. They're attracted to happy residents. They see those awesome videos that they've showed us with Tel Aviv, everyone dancing. They want to be there, so they'll spend money to get there. In other words, it's a positive feedback loop, or as the people in America like to say, rising tides floats all boats. So back to tourism for a second. Beautiful image, right? When I usually talk to people about sustainable travel, they throw ideas like safaris and virgin beaches, and they mention Costa Rica and stuff like that. And that's a really important part of travel. But it's called ecotourism. It's a really small niche. In fact, the word sustainable travel As a sector, it's still an incredibly small niche in this massive industry. We're talking about, again, the biggest one in the world. That's massive travel. That's about 10 minutes away from here, right, in Tel Aviv. We've all seen these sites. Mainstream travel is about affordability. It's about the triple S's, sand, sun, sea. It's not really about foresight, how do we change the world. But there's this incredible trend, urbanization. So imagine with me for a moment, those 1.1 billion trips were created to be net positive. Let's take a trip. So let's say, I don't know, where you guys want to go today? Paris? Paris sound good? Let's go to Paris. Imagine the trip that you went on, the flight, completely carbon offset. You felt comfortable enough in Paris to take the metro, to take the city bikes. You stayed at some locally owned boutique hotels. You knew they were locally owned. Heck, maybe in an Airbnb. Sorry if there's any hotels here. You visited different parts of the city, not just the Eiffel Tower, because you know there's more there. You're looking for the nightlife, the culture. And you also know that by you spending your money around the city, you've helped the entire city, not just one specific sector. You've literally raised that tide. Now, this is not some futuristic woohoo stuff. We're talking about stuff that could happen today. We have the tools and the strategies to do it. It's up to my industry to make sure that happens, but more on that in a second. See, the benefits of sustainable travel in urban locations, it's not just the environmental aspect. Sure, that's very important. Airlines alone account for 5% of carbon emissions. But look at all this holistic perspective we have here. Economic benefits, social benefits. The entire city will excel because of incoming tourism done well. In fact, if I were to change that term, tourism, take it away, put in cities, put in civic development, put in whatever euphemism we want, I bet you those benefits will remain the same. And that's really the point. They're identical. So we don't have that much time left. And I'll choose the case study. That's obviously New York. We got Paris over there. We'll stick with Singapore. So Singapore is interesting. It's such an outlier that even its own founding father said, and I quote, so I don't want to piss off any Singaporeans here, it's a country that's not meant to exist. Now, the story of tourism in Singapore is much like all other countries. Singapore Tourism Board said, we need to bring as many people to Singapore. No matter what they do, just bring them. Mid-70s, they realized that's only half the story. You see, we don't want them just to come and do the basic standards. We want them to stay longer, spend more money, and really enjoy and understand what the culture of Singapore is. So rather than focus on tourists, the Singaporean Tourism Board focused on the locals. In what was called the $1 billion plan, they spent literally $1 billion on conserving and even inventing new cultural heritage sites. It's pretty crazy. They built new infrastructure, they made new events, they got the residents excited. All the tourists that came in, they stayed longer. Business tourists became leisure tourists, and suddenly, Singapore is both on the top list of most livable cities, but also most beloved tourism destinations. So with the limited time that I have, is there a panacea? Is there a silver bullet? Is there one solution? No, hell no. And even if there was, I don't have time to tell you what it is. But find me after. So one suggestion. This is a nonprofit organization that I was fortunate enough to start with the UN Foundation. It's called Travel+Social Good. Our mission simply to propel the world's largest industry to meet its potential for positive impact on a global scale. What the heck does that mean? Well, one of the projects that we're really excited about is we're starting innovation hubs in cities around the world. Cities like Chicago, Austin, Santiago, Chile, hopefully here in Tel Aviv. The idea, bring in the stakeholders, bring in the tourism specialists, the nonprofit leaders, the tech innovators, the public sector, bring them together and start projects working on how to really transform our cities into capitals of sustainable travel. So with that, I invite you to find me. Let's have a chat, let's collaborate, and thank you very much.